We're going to be talking about migration from Parse and the process that you would be going through if you decide to use Backendless. Since many of you, I assume, are not familiar with Backendless, I thought I'm going to give you a quick overview about the company, about the service that we have, so you would have a little bit of better idea of where we're coming from, where we are, where we're moving to, and ultimately, as a goal of this webinar, how to migrate from Parse to Backendless. Throughout this webinar, I'll be taking a look at any questions or that you might have, so feel free to throw your questions as I go. I'll periodically stop and check just so I can answer right there. And then towards the end of the webinar, we will also spend some time answering any questions that you might have. So as far as Backendless, we started 4 years ago. We are in Dallas, Texas. The company is self-funded. We never raised any institutional investment for the reason that we were fortunate enough that we didn't have to raise any money, and we managed to stay in business and continue to grow. The company at this point is fairly healthy and stable. We are doing really good. We see a lot of people now with Parse shutting down, joining Backendless, which makes us even stronger. We do have a fairly solid vision as far as how we want to progress with our service and where we want to be. We take particular care about our users through support. So if any of you had any experience posting questions, hopefully you noticed that we try to answer pretty much right away or within a reasonable time frame. We have gotten fairly good coverage by analysts, by companies that do reviews of various IT and technology companies. Gartner has referenced us in 14 of their research papers. There is a dedicated research by IDC, which is an analyst firm. We won in one of the startup competitions. It was in a European competition called IDCE, and we were a runner-up in that competition. So altogether, I know we are still fairly not known in the grand scheme of things, but as far as where we stand, it's a fairly solid play, both as a technology and as a business. Now, as far as the actual service, Backendless is available in 3 different shapes and forms that we distributed in. There is Backendless Cloud, which is similar to what Parse provides in the cloud. It is the centralized installation, and exactly the same software that we provide in the cloud is also available in the prepackaged form that you can download and install on your own computer or your cloud instances, and that one is called standalone Backendless. And finally, there is another packaging that we provide. It's called Managed Backendless, and it is identical to cloud, except that we stage, install, and manage it and monitor it for you specifically for a particular application or a company. So that way, the data is entirely protected and isolated from any other apps, any other processes. It's a dedicated installation that really doesn't have any limitations that you would find in Backendless Cloud, for instance. To delve a little bit deeper, so as far as the cloud, as I said, it's decentralized, it's highly scalable. All the apps are co-located. We maintain the boundaries as far as the security. However, it's that the cluster of computers that handles Backendless Cloud is shared by multiple clients. All SDKs that we provide, we have a number of native SDKs. The endpoint URI points to Backendless Cloud, but can be modified if you are using the standalone version. So as far as the SDKs, we do have builds. All our SDKs are open source. They are in our Git repository. We do have SDKs for Android, iOS, JavaScript, .NET, PHP, and REST. There is one for ActionScript, but it's not as popular since ActionScript, Flash, and Flex are kind of going away. As far as the pricing, there is one pricing plan, and that is free. So I will not focus a lot on pricing in this presentation, and I assume you will have questions about pricing. We can talk about pricing during the Q&A during this webinar. Okay, standalone Backendless, as I mentioned, it's available through the prepackaged installers. Right now we have installers for Linux and Mac OS. An installer for Windows is also coming up fairly soon. We'll already have a preliminary version that is going through QA, so it will become available in a fairly short period of time on our website. There is also a virtual machine packaging that we have. It's available through our partner company called Bitnami. They provide all the build processes for our installers and virtual machines. In fact, you can launch Backendless right from their website. If you search Bitnami Backendless, you'll see it, and you can just search it on Amazon, Google Cloud, DigitalOcean. So those are available configurations there. Backendless, standalone Backendless is available free of charge when you run the entire Backendless platform on a single computer or virtual machine. We don't care how big that computer is. You could have 256 gigabytes of RAM, 32 cores. If everything is running on the same machine, it's free of charge. If you start virtualizing and have multiple VMs on that machine, then a fee would be applicable. But still, this is kind of pricing related, so I will not delve a whole lot into it. Let's focus on technology for now. Managed Backendless, as I said, we stage, run, monitor, manage that installation specifically for your app. There is 24/7 monitoring. There is SLA. And if you are constrained by any kind of compliance, let's say HIPAA, whatnot, then this would be an ideal solution if you don't want to deal and mess with your own servers. There is a question of the name of the company that provides virtual machine packaging. The name of the company is Bitnami, Bitnami. If you go to bitnami.com, search for Backendless there, you will find a page for Backendless on Bitnami. Question, is there a limit on number of apps on the backend? No, there is absolutely no limit with any of our installations. So standalone, managed, or cloud, you can create as many apps as you want. There's an excellent question of whether someone would offer us $85 million to sell, would we do it? If not, if no, why not? I'd love to get back to this question towards the Q&A section of the webinar and talk about that. All right, let's continue with my presentation. It's going to be fairly short because I would like to spend most of the time during this webinar in the actual technology. So how similar is Backendless to Parse? Fairly similar. For the majority of functionality provided by Parse, we do have either identical or similar support for many of those features. So for all of the things that you see here, Backendless provides support in more or less in the same capacity. There are some things better. There are some things that where we fall short, and I'll talk about them because we're making sure that we provide a very smooth transition for your apps from Parse to Backendless. So data storage, being able to store your objects in Backendless, it's pretty much on par. File hosting, you can upload your files and store them in Backendless. So geopoints, users, roles, so all the things that you see here are available in Backendless. So some things to point out where we are different, or let's say where we fall short. So for objects, some things that you cannot do today in exactly the same way that you would do it in Parse. With Parse, you can save an object which references a file. In fact, you can do it in a single call. Right now, with Backendless, it would require two calls. One to upload a file. There is an API to upload a file, and then in the response, you get the URL for that file which you would store inside of the object. And then this way, you would have an object that references a file. We are making changes to make it almost identical to the way it would work with Parse, where you can do it in a single shot, upload a file, and store an object without making two calls. We're making it a little bit more flexible, where the file that you reference can reside anywhere on the internet. It doesn't have to be in Backendless storage. You could just provide the URL that sits anywhere for a file that sits anywhere, and the link would still be created. And when you retrieve that object back on the client side, we can pull the SDK would pull that file from anywhere. So that is coming soon to Backendless. How soon? We are about, say, 60% done with the implementation, and I'd say you should be able to see that functionality available in Backendless sometime in March. So for file hosting and file support, outside of that, it's almost identical, with some of the difference that I'm going to cover in the next slide. Geopoints, you can definitely link data objects with geopoints, in a single API call. So you can store a data object referencing a geopoint, you can retrieve, and so on. With geopoints, there is a lot more that you can do, like you can attach arbitrary metadata to your geopoints, and that metadata is searchable, so you can query your geopoints using a query language that we support, which is very similar to SQL, and I'll show you that to you guys. For users, roles, and ACL, the support is pretty much the same. You can create your user objects, you can define custom roles, you can assign roles to users, you can have ACL, access control lists, for your objects, for geo categories, for files. So as you can see, some things are different. Like for files, you can attach permissions for file downloading and so on, which I don't think is available in Parse. Push notifications, from the sheer capability to send out push notifications, it's the same. You can register your certificates for your iOS certificates, Android. We'll have support for Kindle, for Windows Phone. So sending out a push notification works the same way. Some things that would be different on the UI side in our console, and by the way, what you know in Parse as dashboard, we call console. So in our console, it is not as nice as Parse's as far as being able to create a push notification and just have a preview of how it looks and so on. So that's another thing that we are improving on that will be much better fairly soon. Cloud code, being able to customize your backend with custom code. We do have it. We support cloud code in Java, PHP, and JavaScript. JavaScript is being improved as we speak, once again, with a tentative release to be really on par with what Parse does with JavaScript in cloud code sometime in March. But as far as Java support, it is, I think it is superior to what you would find in Parse, and I'll show you why. Import-export capability is built in. You can export all the data out of Backendless. You can import data into Backendless, which will probably be the central point of the migration from Parse, because we rely on our import capability to move data from Parse into Backendless. Let's take a look at the questions that you might have. The question is about instant messaging. Do we have it here? I'm going to cover it in this current slide. We'll talk about that. Can you sort using a geopoint? Yes, you can definitely sort using geopoints. Can you search for geopoints in the rectangular and the radius around the point? Yes, absolutely. It's one of the built-in APIs that we have in our geolocation service. Do we support A/B testing on notifications? No, we do not. That's one of the things that where we fall short from Parse. Is it possible to send a push notification in the future? Yes, we do support scheduled push notifications. Do you support geo time zone targeting on notifications? Not today. That would have to be done. If you were to do it today, that would have to be done at the application level, so inside of your logic. So that is not available out of the backend automatically. Cloud code, do you support before after save hooks? Yes, we do. Timed jobs running in background? Yes, we do support that. Is Backendless similar? Is Backendless real-time similar to Firebase? If you're talking about the capability to notify clients that would have an object in their possession when that object is modified, no, we don't have that capability. So whenever object is saved, other clients that have that object are not being notified. So from that perspective, we are not similar to Firebase. Can cloud functions call other cloud functions? Yes, they can. Does your help documentation, hold on. There's an excellent question of whether we have some sort of reference of showing how it is done in Parse and how to do it in Backendless. That's something that we're working on. We pulled Parse's docs from Git, and we modified them to show what the API would look like in Backendless right there in Parse's documentation. So that work has been done for about 90%. And it's in the final stages. So we'll be publishing something very soon that will show that for you. We started with Android, and then we'll move on to iOS and create something similar for iOS as well. Question, the cloud code in JavaScript will be implemented in March. Yes, right now that's the goal, that we will open up the capability in March so you can start building your cloud code functions. in JavaScript. Question, I see you support hosting. Can it support Express Engine or other Node.js modules? Yes, it can, and I'll show you how that works as well. All right, let me switch back to the presentation and talk about how different Backendless is from Parse. So right in our console or dashboard, you can link objects in a visual manner between each other, or link your objects to geopoints. With Parse, you have to know object ID and you copy and paste, which creates an error. Linking an object to related objects, let's say if you have a relation, in Parse, I could not figure out how to do it with existing objects. So you can create new objects in relation, but linking an object to another object in Parse's dashboard, I could not figure it out how to do it. It is available in Backendless. Our searches, whenever you search for data, whenever you search for geopoints, you can use SQL-like queries. In fact, it is a subset of SQL 92, so you can structure your queries in a fairly standard way that expresses data constraints. We do have a graphical file browser, so for the files that are uploaded to your application, you can see them, you can navigate through the directories, you can get the links, you can edit the files right in the browser, you can create new files right in the browser in our console, and you can assign permissions to your files right in the browser in our console. We do have a geopoint browser, so you can see all the geopoints on the map right in Backendless. We do have support for geofences, so you can create a geofence right in Backendless console. You can assign rules that dictate what happens with that geofence. So for instance, when a geopoint crosses the boundary of geofence, you can say that a push notification goes out to a user associated with that geopoint. That is all available today. We do have support for video and audio streaming, so creating something like a video chat or a video player, or recording video from a device's camera and storing it in Backendless app. That is available and possible today. We do have support for publish subscribe messaging, so you can create publishers that send out messages to channels, and you can have subscribers that subscribe to receive messages from channels, and that is built into our API. And it's cross-platform, so you could have an Android publisher and iOS subscriber. They can communicate through the PubSub messaging. There is a fairly powerful support for code generation, so you can build generate code for your app and download and run it without making any changes to the code, and see how certain features work in Backendless. And as I said, server-side code, we support Java, PHP, and Node.js. Let me give you a fairly quick overview of the Backendless architecture. I know that perhaps because of the resolution, you cannot see this diagram very well. I wonder if I go a little bit higher on the resolution, it may get a little bit better. So the architecture of the platform, there are 4 products in the platform. So there is Backendless mBaaS, which is sort of the foundation where all the services are hosted, both services that we provide and the services that you publish. And the services that you publish, there is another product within Backendless called Backendless API Engine. The way it works is you can publish arbitrary Java code or arbitrary PHP code. We automatically scan that code and create an API service. We generate REST APIs on the fly. We generate native SDKs for your service on the fly, and that service becomes available along the built-in services for your application. And inside of that code, you can do whatever you want. All right, so there is analytics for that service. There is security where you can restrict access to individual methods of that service. If you are a Java developer, you may not know anything about Objective-C or Swift, but a native SDK will be created on the fly, and Objective-C and Swift developers can start communicating with your service that is running inside of Backendless. Finally, there is a Backendless hosting, which is the hosting environment for static content or dynamic content that runs inside of your application. And it is tightly integrated with the rest of the system. So there is API that you can use in the mBaaS product to work with the files that are running in the hosting. And in parallel universe to all these 3 blocks, there is another product that we released in December of last year, just a couple of months ago. It is Backendless Marketplace, which I think is the number one differentiator of Backendless from pretty much anyone who is in this space. And Backendless Marketplace is exactly what it sounds like, but it is a server-side app store that includes different types of products. Right now, it includes products that we call function packs, and those are products that you can install to expand on the limits that are built into Backendless Cloud. However, Backendless Marketplace will also contain custom services that we will enable anyone to develop and publish into Marketplace for free or for a fee. So if you develop something cool in Java, PHP, or Node.js, you can publish it as a service, make it available to anyone who builds apps on top of Backendless, and they can easily import that service into their Backendless backend and start consuming it. And then depending on the pricing scheme that you defined, they will be billed accordingly, and then you get you get the money that you basically declared how much it's going to cost minus our commission. So that's the idea of the marketplace. So this should give you a good overview of our architecture. Now, kind of coming back to the real essence of today's presentation, Parse to Backendless. So as far as migrating an application from Parse to Backendless, it boils down to primarily, moving your data, your users, your files, geopoints, your business logic, and application settings from one backend to another. Okay, so our goal is to provide an absolutely painless migration path. Is it painless today? No, but we are making significant improvements. It's been a little bit more than a week since Parse announced. We have already made significant improvements in that algorithm. Ideally, the way it's going to work is that you run an export from Parse, you get your zip file, you put it into Backendless, and the majority of pretty much any information that is available in Parse export will become available in Backendless automatically. So as far as the migration of your data, the green check marks that you see, that is available today. So whenever you export objects from your Parse storage, if they don't have any relations, they will be imported. So if those objects reference as files, if they reference geopoints, if they have pointers, they will be processed today. Okay. For all other scenarios, you will get an error. Okay. We will be doing an update later this week that will give you support for relations, users, and roles. So we should really cover pretty much everything here. I put 2 weeks or less, but more than likely it's going to be less. So with that said, this would cover about, let's say, 80% of everything that a Parse application may consist of. And for some applications, it could be 100%. So your files will automatically be in Backendless storage, and your data objects will be linked to those files. The geopoints, same thing. They will be created in our geolocation storage. Data objects will have links to geopoints. Relations will work out automatically. Users will be created. As far as users and just object IDs in general, so all the object IDs will be maintained exactly the same way. Whenever you migrate your data from Parse to Backendless, all the object IDs stay. For users, passwords will stay exactly the same way. We support exactly the same algorithm as Parse to do user authentication. So your users will not need to change passwords whenever you migrate from Parse to Backendless. All the roles will be pre-created. Things that would need to be done, and more than likely they will require manual intervention, is setting up the ACL roles. Right now, it is in the kind of experimental stage where we're trying to see what the best way to match up Parse's security model in the way it is provided in the export, and create all those links automatically in Backendless, so that that we have not done it where we have level of confidence to say, yes, you don't need to worry about it, that will be handled. So as of right now, we take the stance that more than likely you would need to go in and do some manual tweaking. But once again, I want to repeat that our goal is to do everything we can. So if it is algorithmically possible, we will take care of this. Now, as far as the cloud code, so cloud code in Backendless, as I said, is in Java and PHP. And Node.js, you can create Express.js scripts in JavaScript in Backendless today. You can upload your JS code, and it will become an executable code. However, from the perspective of creating before and after API handlers in JavaScript, you cannot do it today, and that's what's coming in March. You can do that today in Java and PHP, but not in JavaScript. So our goal is to support your cloud code, JavaScript code as is, with zero changes. So if you have parse.cloud code, we plan to support it the same way, where you don't need to even change parse to backendless. That's our goal. So we'll do it. We'll try to do that if possible, and it looks like it will be possible. So right now, more than likely it will be available after March as far as just automatic support. But with some migration, just changing, let's say, the class name, the plan for that is to support it in March. All right, now application settings, that would need to be done manually today. And then more than likely it will be automated as well. So as far as the app settings for social logins like Facebook API key, Twitter API, push notification certificates, email settings, and so on, you would have to do it by hand. Luckily, in Backendless console, the API is not complicated. I mean, the UI is not complicated at all. So you should be able to do it in a fairly straightforward manner. So that's my presentation. We still have, I want to leave about 10, 15 minutes for questions. It is 1:30 now. So I'm going to switch to Backendless and give you a demo of migration from Parse to Backendless. So here, in my Parse application, I created a super simple but rather demonstrative data schema. So I do have a table called person, which includes a reference to a file. So it's a file with a picture of me, and I do also have a relationship, which is a pointer from person to address right here. So you can see it is pointing to an address in Dallas, Texas. There are two addresses right here. And with this, I created a zip file, already emailed it to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an app in Backendless. I'm going to call it My Webinar Demo. And in that application, I'm going to go into Manage, Import, and there is a single zip file option that I'm going to click and select. So this is the latest export that I got from Parse. Going to open it up, and the import process is started. Once it is complete, there's going to be an email. I'm pretty sure I already got it. To verify, what you can do is you can go to the files section. So this is going to be like an overview for you guys for Backendless console. So everything related to files is going to be in the files. And whenever you're doing import, an import folder will be created. And then here, you will see this import data log, which is the status of the import procedures. So you can, by opening up this file, you can open it up in the built-in editor. It is available right behind this icon, like edit file. You click and see this is the status of the import. So as you can see, it processed the table person, it processed the table address, okay? Now, everything related to data is going to be in the data screen. So you click on data. And as you can see, there are two tables now, person and address. And users were not imported. I did have a user here, so in fact two, but those users are not processed yet. That will be in the build, which we'll be publishing this week. So let's focus on the data tables. So person table, as you can see, it's exactly the same data as I had it in Parse, the same object ID. Now for the relationships, there is a relationship that is created with the address table. So they work like this, from person to address. And to see which address it is, if I click on that link, it shows up that address. So with address, all the same columns that we had in the Parse application, and it shows that there is a back reference to the person. And for the geo point in my address, remember in here, I did have geo point like this. In Backendless, you have the geo point like this. If you click on that geo point, it switches to the geolocation screen, and here it is, my geo point, okay? And it shows exactly on the map where it is. This corresponds to Dallas, Texas, okay? Going back to data, if I select person, also the photo column, which in Backendless look like this photo, and it's a link to the file. Right now, it will contain a URL to the file that was uploaded. If I paste it in the browser, it's going to be, here you go, that's me. And this file resides once again in files. If I click on files, in let's take a look, that's going to be the import folder. So if you go to import, here it is. This is the file that was migrated from your my Parse application into Backendless. So that is right there. Now, when it comes to managing your tables, the way you do it in Backendless, there is this button that says Table Schema and Permissions. If you click on it, you will see all the columns that are available in your table. You can add a new column and select the data type. If it is, you can be, let's say, if it's a string, you can also assign various constraints, whether it's not null, whether it's unique or indexed, and so on. You can add your own validators, which are triggered whenever object is being updated or created, or you can assign a custom regular expression validator, which I think are features unique to Backendless. I didn't see anything like this in Parse. So that's how you manage your schema. You can change to see a different table. So here it is. This is the address, and the GPS, as you can see, is marked as a geo relation, which means it's a relationship to a geo point. It's one-to-one, but you can create geo relations one-to-many, where a single property contains multiple locations. In fact, let me show you how to do it. Let's call it geo points, and it's going to be like a geo point relationship one-to-many. Click Save. So now we do have column geopoints, and it's one-to-many. Now, creating relations, let's say you want to edit your relations in console. You just click on this plus, and it opens up a list of all the objects. Since it knows that the address is one-to-one, indicated by this line, one line, it's one-to-one, 3 lines, one-to-many. Everything is going to be a radio button. And for one-to-many, I think it was in the address, geopoints, see this is one-to-many. If I click on this, I can select them with checkboxes. So I set related geopoints. So now there are multiple geopoints in this relationship. And as far as data objects with each other, it works exactly the same way. I foresee a question whether schema creation can be completely dynamic, like in Parse. Yes, it can be. You don't have to use console at all. You can just start writing your objects, persisting them with the API. Schema will be derived, and tables will be created completely dynamically. You don't need to do it here. However, if you prefer to do it here, no problem. You can easily just start with Backendless console and go from there. Creating a new table is as simple as clicking on this plus button here. So that's the goal, is to automate the process of migration from Parse to Backendless, so you can see all of your tables right here. Okay, a couple of other things that you will find important. User management. So the user schema is managed under the users section. So on the users section, you have user properties, where you can add your custom properties the same way you would be adding columns. So you click on this, register your property, identify the type, and it goes in there. You can configure email templates that go out whenever user registers, whenever user logs in for the first time. You can type in that email, and those emails go out. Code generation, it's something that might be very helpful whenever you're starting with Backendless. It is available also in console. Code generation, click on this, select the operating system that you target, select the features that you want to be generated. So if you want to see login, registration, password recovery, or Facebook login, whatever else, then you click on download project. You get a zip file that includes all the code that you can just put into Android Studio, open it up and run it, and it will be communicating with your backend. As far as communication with the backend, it's very similar as with Parse. There is an application ID, and there are secret keys for each individual operating system, and it's all available on the manage screen. Okay. Let's see. I predict there's going to be a lot of questions. Let's take a look at the questions, and if there is something specific you would like to see, just let me know. Put it in the question, and I will be. I'll be happy to show that to you. All right. Let me go back just to make sure that I didn't miss any questions. Question: are there any servers located in Europe, or is it only in the United States? As of right now, the data center is in the data centers are in the United States. We are going to be expanding the data centers, and there will be a data center also in Paris. However, keep in mind that with standalone Backendless, you can launch it anywhere. So if you want to have your own installation of Backendless, you can use standalone Backendless. If you would like us to stage specifically for you, then managed Backendless is also an option. If I install the hosted version on a cloud virtual private server, let's say Amazon, is it free per VPS or free for one VPS only? It is free for a single VM. So if the entire installation of Backendless, and it consists of multiple modules, there is a caching server, there is application server, there is database, there is application, there is a web server. So all the moving parts, when they're all on the same virtual machine, it is free. As soon as you move one out or you create a replica of it for scalability purposes, then a licensing fee is applicable. So instant messaging, as I said, publish subscribe messaging is available. You can work with it on the messaging screen. So here you will see a list of all the channels, and you can create new additional channels in the code or in right here in console. Just click plus. Whenever your devices register for push notifications, you will see them on the devices tab. They will show up right here. You can publish either a regular pub sub message to all your subscribers, or you can publish a push notification. So if you publish a push notification, you would need to put the headers corresponding to the operating system, and each operating system has its own set of headers, and you can put multiple in here and then mark it as a push notification and identify what devices it is going out to. Or you can publish push notifications using Backendless API. I'm just scrolling through the questions, and some of them I already answered. Cloud code, so that's something that I forgot to show. So all the cloud code is available on Business Logic. So click on Business Logic, and there are a couple of things here. So first of all, the API services section, this is where you can deploy your own PHP or Java code, and it generates a service. To demonstrate, if you click New Hosted Service, there's going to be one sample service built in. Click on this. Let's call it shopping cart. And what this does is essentially we prepackage the jar file with just Java code. So whenever you use the sample service, the Java code is deployed and the routes are generated. So there is a method in there, Java method, get instructions. Now there is an HTTP REST route, get/instructions. When you invoke it, a Java invocation takes place, and this is the response from Java service. It actually gives you instructions on how to use that service. But here you will see that the service SDKs for that service were automatically generated as well. Now, as far as the cloud code that you are familiar with, similar to Parse, it is going to be available on the service handlers. So for instance, for before save, after save. First of all, select the language. Right now it's Java or PHP. Once the language is selected, for data tables, let's say, we create an event handler, and that's going to be event is, let's say, create, find by ID, remove, update, and so on. So you select the event for which you want to create an event handler. So let's say before create. So you select create, call timing is going to be before, and you can identify a specific table for which that event handler is going to be created. So let's say table is person. You click save, and it generates Java code person table event handler right here. And it's, in fact, it says add your code here. You click on download, it's going to give you Java project that you can open in IDEA or Eclipse or anywhere you like. And you know that you can just modify this function right here, add your code, and that's going to be your custom business logic for the table person, which will be invoked anytime a new object is created. What's cool about this is notice that the argument that's going to be delivered into this custom logic is already a strongly typed Java class person that was created specifically for the table person. So we automatically create these Java wrappers. If you started with Java but want to move to PHP, no problem. Select PHP. All the code is automatically regenerated in PHP, and now your event handler is PHP code. Okay. Once we add JavaScript, it's going to be the same way. You select JavaScript, boom, all the code is regenerated for JavaScript. You can create as many handlers as you want. You may have different handlers for different tables. You can have a handler for every single API. So let's say for files, if you create a handler that handles move to repositories, so when the file is moved or deleted or saved or copied, so for each of these operations, you can have your own handler. Same thing for users. So here, whenever a user is logging in or registering, so as you can see, every single API that we support has its own pair of before and after handlers. Background jobs, we call them timers. So click on timers, and here you can create your own timer. Here's how it works. You click on timer, give it a name, let's say my timer, whether it's enabled by default or not. When it starts, you can select the date when the timer is going to be running, set the time. Now, whether it expires at a certain point of time, if it never, say never, if it is on a date, then you select the date when it expires. And now you can configure how frequently that timer runs. Once, no problem. It's going to run once on that time and it's going to stop. You can do daily. If it's daily, it'll repeat every 2 days. Okay. If you want to do it weekly, you say, well, run every 2 weeks on Monday and Thursday. Or if you want to do it monthly, you say, well, let's run it every January, May, and October on first and last Monday of those months. No problem. Click save the code. Oh, timer will not be executed. I guess we have a problem. Yeah, so let's just say never. That's going to be better. There you go. So timer is created. Here's the code for timer. All the information is going to be in the annotation as far as the schedule. You add your code right here. You deploy it to Backendless. That code is going to be executed exactly accordingly to the schedule that you configured. So that's how background jobs work in Backendless. I'm going back to the questions now. There is a question on supporting Express.js in Backendless. That one is supported in the Files section. So if you go to Files and select Web and then select Scripts, any JS files that you put in here will be executed as Node.js scripts. Any additional Node modules would need to be uploaded to the Node modules folder. So here, this hello.js, it's as basic as this. It just basically returns back hello world. So to run this hello.js, again, I'm going to get the public URL of that file, and then this icon does that. So click on it, it copies it to clipboard, and then if I paste that URL, it's going to be, it just invoked that Node.js script. So this hello world is a result of the Node.js invocation. So that's the support for Express.js. In the examples folder, you will have it once you create your application. There's going to be a shopping cart that's a fairly complete application. To run it, get the public URL of index.html. Once again, click on this and paste that URL for index.html. And here you can run that application that runs in the Backendless hosting by invoking Express.js scripts. For behind every one of these buttons, it's going to be an invocation of one of these scripts. Question about the migration tool. How stable is the procedure? I couldn't import my data no matter how hard I tried. As of right now, it is work in progress. We incrementally update our service anytime we make an improvement and it passes our QA. So where it stands right now, some things are still not supported. For instance, relations. They're not supported. We run into some edge case scenarios where a data field may be large enough or larger than what's allowed in Backendless. Those bugs are being ironed out. Our goal is, let's say in the next month, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, have it completely ironed out, long before the deadline with Parse comes up in January of next year. So where it stands right now, you will see some failures. Our plan is, once it is fully supported, we're going to go through every single user that we know had tried to import and ran into errors. We will do a mass email to let you guys know that try it now. It should work. Okay, so please bear with us while we're going through this process, but we're working hard on this. Question is, some of the great pros about using Parse was the amazing support, documentation, and Q&A community. How would you say yours compares? Based on, well, my opinion, if you ask me, it's going to be biased. So I'm going to base it on what I heard from other users. And what I heard from other users is that people seem to be genuinely surprised when they get a response on our support forum pretty much the moment when they posted a question, because I don't think that anything like this has ever happened on Parse support. And I've received some links pointing to Parse support where I believe that was just outrageous in the way things were handled. Maybe those were exceptions. I don't know. And I don't really care. My goal is to be extremely passionate about support, because I am. I'm coming from a development background. I know how important it is when you're sitting and just waiting a response to a technical question. So the position we take internally and the attitude that we have is our goal is to answer as quickly and as accurately possible as we can to the questions that you post. Documentation is it's an ongoing process. I know where we stand today. Some parts of our documentation are good. Some parts are very good. Some parts need a lot of improvement. We know that. And we do allow comments in the docs, so we hear you loud and clear on the parts that are not great. So keep in mind that in comparison to Parse, we don't have $100 billion company behind us. Maybe for a good reason, and maybe that's why we're still in business. But we don't have the same resources that they had. Yet we try to provide better service. So the best way to know how ours are different from Parse is just to try it out. You go through the getting started guide, see how it works. If you run into a problem, post a question to our support. See how quickly you get an answer. See how quickly the problem is being resolved. So I think that's going to be the best measure of how better we are than Parse support. Do you support scheduled jobs? Yes, as timers, and I showed it a little bit earlier. Can we edit data online from the web console, something I used to do in Parse but can't seem to be able to do in Backendless? You can definitely do this. In fact, if you have a data object, here, name, it's Mark Pillar, so John Doe, click enter, it is done. For anything, you can edit data. So you cannot edit object ID. You cannot edit some of the system columns created and updated. For some things, like for instance, if you're editing a Boolean value, simply changing the dropdown will not work. What you will need to do is scroll to the right and click that link. So you change the, let me show how that works. So let me just create a sample Boolean value. And I'm going to call it like this, sample Boolean. And the type is going to be Boolean. No default value. Just click save. So now we do have a Boolean value right here. I'm going to set it to true. Just by setting it to true doesn't do anything. Go right here, click this. Now the value is saved to true. So maybe that's what you were running into. But as far as changing text value, no double click is required. You click, it becomes a text field. You enter new value, hit return, and it will be updated. For relationships, use this plus button to modify it, and you can unlink the related object, you can set new related objects, and so on. So I think it is fairly intuitive. I agree, for some things like dropdowns, this icon here is not very intuitive. But once you know that it's there and tried it once, that should be fairly straightforward as far as how it works. Question, going back to real-time capabilities, such as that with Firebase, is this something that we're looking at and implementing? Yes, it's definitely on our roadmap. Right now, with the whole thing that happened with Parse, of course, there are other priorities, like adding Swift examples to the docs that we heard so many times that we understand it's something that absolutely must be done, and it is happening. So for instance, if you take a look at the user guide, the user services section of our guide, the whole thing already has Swift examples, and we're working through it day and night. There are many other things that we have on our roadmap that will be coming up in fairly soon, and some in the longer time. Real-time update, similar to what Firebase has, is definitely on our roadmap, and it's fairly high up on the list. Is the code generator also supporting Swift? Where it stands right now, no, it does not. But that's once again one of the items that we have on our list. Do you plan on supporting or creating specific SDKs for Arduino, embedded C, or any other technologies for IoT? Right now, we're on the fence on this, so we're gonna base this on the feedback that we're gonna get from our users, and that's also one other thing that separates us from the pack. We do listen to our users. Majority of our features that we started adding, starting at about version 2.0 of Backendless, we are at 3.0. We're driven by user feedback. So if you want something, write about it, put it into a post on our discussion forum, I mean the support forum, and you can easily influence us if you can convince that this is important that way. But we looked into it, and right now the majority of users, we go to what the majority wants, and we haven't heard a lot of feedback or demand for those types of things. However, with that said, if you were to use our REST API, it is available uniformly. So we don't have a native SDK. However, the REST API is as universal as it can be. And REST API supports every single thing that Backendless can do. Does Backendless support anonymous guest users? Yes. Whenever you use the APIs without logging in a user, we automatically assign not authenticated user role. So speaking of security, let's say, let me show you. If you go to users and select security and restrictions, you will see a list of all the application roles. And all these roles are built in. They're system roles. To give you an idea, authenticated user role is assigned to any user who's logged in. Not authenticated user role is assigned to anyone who's making an API call without logging in. To configure permissions for a role, you click on it, and then you get this matrix. So if you don't want not authenticated user to be able to create data, click on it once, it becomes this red X. So you can actually zero out the capabilities of guest users completely by playing with this permission matrix. You can override it for specific tables. If you go to data and you select, let's say we are in the person table, go to schema and permission and role permissions. So let's say for not authenticated user, as you can see, it inherited all of this. But let's say for this table, you want to override it and say, for this table only, yes, not authenticated users can create objects. So this becomes an override for person table for not authenticated user. Likewise, as you can see, there are roles created for different client types. So if you're using secret key for iOS, then the iOS user will be assigned that invocation. If you're making an invocation from custom business logic from server code, then the server code user gets a role is being assigned. So this way you can play with your permission matrix and assign it any way you want to. But to answer your question, whether guest users are allowed and supported, yes, they are definitely supported. Question, I have used Backendless this week along with a coworker, and we weren't able to work both on the same app. One of us, the session was timing out. Is this a problem, or it has a solution? It has a solution. So what you were experiencing is what we call development team. And if you go to Manage App Settings Development Team, here you can invite team members. However, to be able to add team members, it's a paid feature. Speaking about paid features, if you go to Marketplace, and in the Marketplace, you select, I believe, App Management, you can, for $10 a month, you can create an unlimited team size. So you purchase this function pack, and then you can add as many developers as you want to your app. So creating a team, a development team, and inviting others will cost you $10 a month. So, which might be a segue to the pricing related questions. Feel free to throw those in if you'd like. Array data type. That's one thing that I forgot to mention. Yes, array data types are currently not supported. It's also one of the things that we added, just like with references to files. But in the short term, what you can do is declare it as a string and just store plain JSON in there. So you can just have JSON arrays. When they come back, turn them into a JSON object, and that will give you the capability. Of course, that's not ideal because like searches in arrays are not going to be working, but in the interim, that's probably as close as you can get. We do have it in our plans to add support for array data types as well. How do you plan on supporting relational data? Are you mimicking Parse's pointers, arrays, etc., or will this be different? Well, relational data is built, support for relational data is built into Backendless. We don't differentiate between pointers and relations. You can create in Backendless one-to-one and one-to-many relations, and there are still relations. So as you can see, in my Parses application, I do have address person object with a pointer to address right here, and it references this object ID. And I imported this application into Backendless. So here's my person, and I do have a relationship to address, and it points to the address object. So that was imported just fine. With relations, it's going to be exactly the same way. You will have one-to-many relation with all those objects imported into your app. What changes do I need to make on the client side in the application code? Well, in the client side, you would need to change the APIs to use the Backendless APIs. I know that's probably going to be the most painful part, but most of the APIs are fairly similar. One thing that I'd like to mention, if you are building on Android, one thing that we see over and over is people use the synchronous APIs on the main UI thread. That's a big no-no in Android. You need to use asynchronous APIs on the main UI thread. Or you can just create a thread and in there use synchronous APIs. The reason for this is because Android does not allow network communication on the main UI thread. Therefore, use async on the main thread. But going back to your question, the biggest changes is migrating your APIs from Backendless, from Parse to use Backendless SDK. Regarding importing users from Parse, even if everything gets imported, I'm assuming users would still need to log in, correct? Or do you see it feasible to hide from the user completely the fact that everything was moved? Users would need to log in to establish the session because sessions that were present on Parse are not going to get migrated into Backendless. So a login will be required. However, the login will be transparent because the same user ID, the same password that they had, will work with Backendless. We are migrating it over. Are there any big apps that are already using your service to check them out? There are some big apps, and there are some big apps that are being developed. If you go to our portfolio, you will see some applications in there. There are quite a bit of them. Some of the bigger applications, they have been deployed on in a kind of private ad hoc manner that I cannot talk about. Those are line of business applications powered by managed Backendless. Some applications that I know that are being developed are very big, and they will be published sometime this year. So as that happens, we will be publishing case studies. So you will see them coming up over the course of this year. Do you have a plan for helping us with the span between uploading our Parse export to the time the clients all update their apps to the new version of the Backendless SDK? Any data added to the app at the time would be sent to Parse and Backendless would be aware of it. I recognize this is indeed a problematic part because I imagine the way this would work is you create a new version of your app. So let's say you have an app in production and you create a new version of the app that you publish to the App Store. And that new version of the app points to Backendless. So between the time when the user switches from one version to another version, of course, that lag where the data may be lost because the data is updated in Parse and it's not updated in Backendless. One way to do this is you migrate everything to Backendless. You add into your cloud code in Parse redirects, or essentially in cloud code in Parse, you use our Backendless JS API to redirect this data to Backendless. This way, any updates that are happening will be redirected to Backendless. And once that is in place, then it's just a matter of waiting or announcing to all the users that they can switch to the new version of your app that uses Backendless. So it really is a combination of two things, migrating data and putting redirects. Redirects not in the HTTP sense, but in the sense of using Backendless API within your cloud code for various APIs that happen within Parse. I think it's not ideal, but I think this is the best that we could come up with in terms of providing a smoother migration from Parse to Backendless. I don't know how long ago there was a comment here saying that there is no sound, so hopefully you guys could hear me, because it would be a shame if I was talking and you could not hear me. But there's more questions, so it seems like maybe it was just an incidental problem somewhere. Do you have support for many-to-many relationships? What happens if you import the type of relation from Parse? Well, to begin with, I didn't see anything that would point out to a many relationship in Parse. Whenever you declare a relationship in a particular table, you point to another table, and identically, it works in Backendless. You create a column in one table, and in that column, you declare a relationship either one-to-one or one-to-many in another table. If there's a chance that something that we missed, please contact me directly. My email, by the way, is mark@backendless.com. So if you want to ask any questions offline, feel free to send me an email directly. All right, I'm going to try to go through the remaining questions. There are quite a bit of them, and we're already out of time, but I'll hang on with you guys to answer the remaining questions. What is the difference between string and text in database? String is limited to 500 characters. Text is limited to 2,000 characters. Anything more than that, store in files. So that's the primary difference. There are various timing constraints on Parse for hooks, functions, background jobs. How does Backendless compare? Backendless, for custom business logic that runs on the server side, in the free tier, Backendless allows a runtime for up to 5 seconds. You can buy a function pack out of our marketplace that would expand it to 20 seconds. That's for Backendless Cloud. With standalone Backendless and with managed Backendless, there is no limit on how long cloud code and timers can run. Can you secure the file so it's only accessible when providing your secure keys? Yes, absolutely. So for files, if you go to files and click on security, so for every single folder, you will see this icon, this log. And for every single file, there's going to be a similar log. So if you click on that log, in here you can identify what roles have permission to read, write, and remove files. So here you can restrict on the permission, or you can restrict on the users. So if you have specific users, you just start typing the username, and you'll be able to assign permissions for a specific file or for the folder. All files within a folder, they inherit those permissions. Right now, when we try to migrate data with images with more than 1,000 rows, I see only 7.1 records being imported. Is there any issue currently? Yes. Right now, our import procedure has not been finalized. We're still working on it. There will be scenarios when you will be running into issues. One of the things that you could do if you run into a problem, email us a link to your file. Don't send the files because they could get rather big. Put it into a Dropbox. Upload it into your Backendless app, get the link, email it to us, and say, hey guys, take a look at this file, make sure that it works, and we will be definitely checking with every single file that we get this way. You can send it to support@backendless.com. Security-wise, can you turn off schema creation from the client side? No, you cannot turn it off from the client side. Well, you cannot turn it off today. This question was already asked on our support forum. My response was, before we do something like this, I really would like to understand the rationale of when that would be important. So I would appreciate if you could just post this question to our support forum, support.backendless.com, and this way we could have a conversation on why you believe this is important, because I'm personally struggling to understand in an application where security can be tuned and it's a fixed application with fixed capabilities, why schema creation would need to be disabled. Like, what is it exactly protecting you from? Once we understand, we'll be more than happy to add it. It's just right now I'm kind of failing to see the value of that feature. Does Backendless have a local data store feature similar to Parse? No. On the client side, well, we did some things. It was sort of in the experimental phase. So we do have a caching policy where objects can be stored on the client side, but we have not fully released it. So it's also another thing that is on our list to improve. How do you connect to external MySQL from standalone implementation? So you can connect to an external database through the marketplace. So, and in the current version of standalone, I believe it is hidden in the update for standalone that is coming up. It will become available. You go to marketplace, you select in here databases, and in the databases there are connectors to MySQL, SQL Server, Postgre, and Oracle. And you turn on a connector to your application. You define your connection string right here, database host name, address, database name, login, and everything else. And this connects your backend in Backendless to your database that runs elsewhere. And then every single table that you have in the specified database will show up right here on the data screen. You'll be able to use this pull down, and there will be storage for your database listed right here, and you'll be able to work with your tables. All the same APIs which are available in Backendless, you will be able to use them to communicate with your external database. It's an amazing feature, and it makes more sense to use it in a standalone and managed Backendless manner. However, if your database is exposed on the internet and you would like to leverage it, that's the functionality you should be using. Is it possible to clone the database for reskinning? I'm not sure what reskinning is. However, you can migrate everything out of a Backendless or create an export using the export functionality. So you can go to Manage, Export, and select everything that needs to be exported. Click Export, and the file will be created. You'll receive an email. So that's how you can get the data snapshot. However, it's likely that I'm not answering that very question as far as reskinning. I'm going to research more on this. But if you could send me an email and we'll discuss this offline. I'm on mark@backendless.com. Do you have to generate code each time a change is made? If you change your database schema and you add or remove columns, then I would recommend regenerating the code, because the code that is generated for your tables, if you use code generation, of course, will get out of sync with the actual backend. So it is recommended to regenerate the code. What is the media section for? The media section is for working with your media streams. So whenever you have an Android or iOS apps publishing video streams or recording media streams, those media streams will show up right here. So recorded media is going to be the video files recorded from the devices, and online streams will show all the streams that are being broadcast right now. So that's what this is for. Can you give us a glimpse on analytics? Absolutely. So if you go to Manage and select Analytics, then right here you will be able to see the performance, which is the number of requests per second that occurred during, in this case, past 30 days. You can see the invocation of the API calls. In fact, there were 2 that happened today when I was invoking custom service. In here, you can select service name, method name, and get the instrumentation of the invocations by specific client for specific methods. So as you can see, method get instructions from my custom service was invoked one time by a REST client. You can also get information on the successful calls, error calls, and so on. Change the duration of time and so on. This will show you registered users, media streams, and published messages. So all the analytics is available on Manage Analytics. Is your code generator in general supporting documentation supporting latest Swift syntax? Well, the code generator doesn't support Swift yet. As far as the documentation, we're going through the process of updating it with Swift-related docs, and we use Swift 2.0 syntax for that. Can you please compare your offerings to Azure and AWS if you have any knowledge of those? I've looked into AWS. I thought that it lacks a lot of features that one would need from a modern and advanced mBaaS platform. As far as Azure, It was some time ago that I looked into it, about a year and a half. I was presenting at a users group where it was a guy from Microsoft talking about the same point, and I was lucky enough to go first, so he didn't really have a lot to say because his presentation really lacked a lot of things. But over a year and a half, I'm sure a lot of things have changed. We do not run into Microsoft that often. In the many competitive situations we have been, Microsoft never really came up, and thus it's not really on our radar of serious competitors. As far as AWS, I monitor rather frequently what they do. I think they fall short, rather far behind of where Backendless is today. If we need help and support with Backendless integrations, what channels do you offer? We do offer consulting services. So we do have a professional services team, which is a part of our team, and we do constant rotation between R&D and professional services. So those are really the guys that are coming from the product development, and then at some point we'll go back to product development. So if you do need help with migration of your application, whether it's the backend work or the client side, we do have people to help you out. For this, send an email to sales@backendless.com to start the conversation. We'll be more than happy to assist you with the process of migrating your app or recoding the client side, whatever it takes. How similar is the Backendless iOS API to Parse's API? For example, I use Parse UI built-in view controllers for login, table views, a lot about the things. Does Backendless have similar APIs, and how easy it is to switch? If you're using Parse's UI, I think you can. All of it is open source. You can actually change it inside of the UI to talk to Backendless rather than Parse. It really is just a matter of changing the underlying call to point to a different backend and use our APIs. Our APIs, for the most part, are fairly similar. There are some differences, like for instance, for all our iOS APIs, we do provide more than one version of that API, depending how you want to handle exceptions. There is a version of a call that will just throw a fault as an exception whenever server returns an error, or you can pass in a fault object and it will be initialized. If you want to use blog-based callbacks, we support that as well. So there are more options that you get with Backendless as far as the APIs. How similar they are, I believe they're fairly similar, but you'll be the ultimate judge for that. Parse has a query limit of 1,000 records. Does Backendless have a similar query limit? Yes, Backendless provides built-in support for paging. So our APIs that work with data give you an ability to retrieve data in pages by modifying the page size and offset. So the largest data block that you can get from Backendless is 100 records. There are several examples on our website. Check out Backendless API Cookbook, which is, if you go to our website, it's going to be available right on the main menu, right here, API Cookbook. In there, you will find examples showing how to work with paging. It's pretty good. I think it's going to give you a much better option of creating a fast, responsive app. Can you show an example of push messaging through Backendless API? I would love to, given that we're already 2:15 at 15 minutes over our time. I'll do that on our webinar next week, on Tuesday next week, the 16th. So be sure to join us. I'll spend time on going through the push notification and messaging. Can we import installation from Parse and send push notification to devices? The way it works with Backendless, you can send notification to devices that have called a registered device API. So simply importing installation from Parse will not do a whole lot, because that device needs to be registered with Backendless. Whenever a device registers with Backendless, if you go to messaging and then devices, you will see it in the list right here. So importing the installation table will not do a whole lot, because once again, as I said, it's a matter of switching that device to use our API. Parse had a public Google message board where they tried to channel general questions to, with members of the Parse team attempted to answer and help as much as they can. Do you, or will you offer similar support channel? I believe our support channel, which is support.backendless.com, already provides this capability. Whenever you post a question there, anyone who is on the Backendless team sees it, and many times it's the same people who work on the product respond to your questions. So I don't think it's going to be worthwhile creating additional channels, because we would like to keep all the information related to help and support centralized to our support forum. What SDK should I be concerned with to develop Java desktop apps for Windows? You would need to use our SDK for Java/Android. It's the same SDK that will work for Android apps and for standalone Java apps. So whether it's for Windows or for Linux, Java is Java. If you want to build native Windows apps, you can use our .NET SDK. But if it is a Java application, use the SDK for Android, which is the same thing as SDK for Java. And there's a question, what is CodeRunner? CodeRunner is our container that allows you to write custom business logic in Java or PHP, and very soon in Node.js, and it provides the containerization of that logic within our Backendless Cloud environment. You have to regenerate if you change your person schema. Yeah, so if you change your schema, regenerate the code if you're using code generation. Custom events in Cloud Code are critical for us. Can you show that, please? So yes, with custom events, if you go to Business Logic and select custom events, in here, let's just say change to Java, or we could study in PHP. If you add custom event, you give it a name, my event. You can select it to be asynchronous, click Save. It generates this event handler right here. And this is the code that is generated for your event. You add your code right here, and then follow the documentation which talks about custom events. And that's how you get custom events with Backendless. Can you talk about the asynchronous option in the event handler? So in the event handler, if you tagged your event as asynchronous, it will be invoked, but the result from that event will be ignored. So it's basically will be executed in parallel from the main handling of that API. So for instance, if you have an event handler for before create, and if you make it asynchronous, then before create more than likely will be invoked exactly the same time when the main default logic for create. If it is synchronous, then the default logic will wait. If you go to our documentation, you can actually see it in the chart in there. So for custom business logic, let's say for Java, right here, this shows the invocation chain. You send the API request, there's before handler, default logic, after handler. So if this guy is asynchronous, then before handler and default logic are going to be executed in parallel, and the result from before handler will be simply ignored. All right, how frequently can timers run? Timers can run I believe every minute in the free plan, if I'm not mistaken. You can make it more frequent with an additional function pack. Do you have in your request limit, like Parse, 30 requests per second for free? Yes, our limit is 50 requests per second for free, and they're calculated the same way Parse did it on a per minute basis. They're prorated on the per minute. So, but the free tier right now is 50 API requests per second. Can a geofence be active with a certain time frame only? Right now, the way to do it is you can enable geofence and it's on, but then we also provide management APIs that give you an ability to control everything through the API, the same things that the console does. The management API, you can also purchase it as a function pack from Marketplace, and that will give you an ability to control your geofences through the API. In fact, if you go to, I believe it's app management, it's $5 per month. So for $5, you can actually have your APIs to control everything that console does through the API. All right, this video will be recorded. Someone is asking. We definitely will be publishing it to YouTube. Can you show where you can download a customized SDK based on the functionality that is desired for the app? So if you go to Business Logic and select hosted. In here, you can create new service by uploading a jar, and the SDKs are generated right here. If you go to the documentation, it's going to be /documentation API engine, and there is a link from our website. So in here, go through the quick start guide. It will tell you everything that you need to do how to develop custom class, how to deploy it, how the code is generated, and so on. Will we be able to debug the cloud server code? Yes, that's one of the most brilliant features that I believe we have. Whenever you write your custom logic in Backendless, whether it's Java or PHP and soon in Node.js, you can debug your cloud code functions and cloud code right on your local developer computer. And that code is plugged into Backendless core in the cloud. So you can actually send API invocations to your application in the cloud, and those requests are going to be rerouted to your local computer, so you can set the breakpoints, you can see exactly what the arguments are, and make sure you debug it and do everything you need, and then publish it into the cloud. So you can definitely do it, and it works today. Can I import data from an Excel spreadsheet or CSV file? Yes, you can. Whenever you go to Manage, Import, you can import individual files for, let's say, to create data tables. So here, whenever you go to Data Service, Add File, you can select a single CSV file, and in the documentation, the format for that CSV file is defined. Can I write a cloud function as I do in Parse and Backendless? Yes, you can. And very soon in March, you'll be able to do it just like you do it in Parse with JavaScript. As of right now, it's Java or PHP. Analytics is pretty straightforward in Parse with custom events and dimensions. Raw data can be viewed and retrieved. How is this on Backendless? I already showed analytics. If you go to Manage Analytics, using this interface, you can see what's going on, how many invocations took place on individual methods, specific clients, specific services, and so on. So it's all available right there on the analytics screen. What is the ETA for Swift examples that will be added? The user service documentation, user guide, has already been updated with all of that. In the next 2 days, we will be updating the data service API with the Swift examples, and then perhaps a week or so for everything else. Until then, if you want documentation for Swift, the best option that you can do, if it is not in the user guide, if you go to our website, and you select Developers API Cookbook, you will see about 100 different articles written on everything related to Backendless. Majority of them have code, and if you click on it, on any given article, you will see that code in Java, Objective-C, Swift, and JavaScript. And this will probably should answer 99% of the questions that you have in there. And that's what I would start if you're looking for an answer of how to do certain things in Swift. All right, so many questions are repeating everything, I guess the answers they already provided. Is the concurrent request limit shared between different callers? Yes, so the 50 requests per second is shared among all different types of clients that will be hitting your backend. Can you demo push notifications, pushing to a single user or subscribe channel? I will be doing it in our webinar next week on the 16th, 1 o'clock Central Time. Can a user have more than one role? If an Android user is logged in, are they Android user or an authenticated user? Yes, user can have multiple roles. In fact, users will have system roles. Let's say if it is a user coming from an Android device, they will have authenticated user, Android user. And if you assign custom roles to user, they will have custom roles as well. You can actually assign roles from the console here. So if I had any users, then the user roles button would be enabled and you would be able to assign it from there. How much will it cost me to run an app with 1,000 daily active users? So there used to be a limit on the daily active users, or actually monthly users. We removed that limitations. Right now there is no limit. So if you have 1,000 daily active users and they generate less than 50 requests per second, then that would be free, because there's really no limit on the number of active users. Can you add custom parameters to user object? Yes, you can, and that's it's in the documentation. So see it in there. You can definitely have custom properties. Are featured packs purchased per app, or are they valid for the whole Backendless account? They are on the per application basis. Can you integrate Backendless with Twilio? Yes, you can, and you would do it right now with if you go to Business Logic, host it, then you create your service that communicates with Twilio, upload it in here, and you get your own APIs in the context of your app that talk to Twilio. However, very soon there will be a service in the marketplace that does exactly the same thing out of the box. What is the API to save image file like Parse and Parse? Well, it's the API to upload a file. So if you go to Backendless documentation, it should be extremely easy to find it. So you go to the docs, let's say it is for Android, select API documentation, click on files, and here, boom, file upload. So that will give you documentation of how to do file upload. What changes are needed in Cloud Code and Business Logic? I assume Cloud Code that you have in Parse. Ultimately, we hope that no changes will be needed. You will just be able to use it as is. Until then, you will. Your option is to create a version in Java or PHP, or use our Express.js integration, which I talked about in this webinar earlier. As per the demo app on Backendless, the shopping cart app, that means that Backendless can be used with success as a CMS. Yes, you can definitely use Backendless as a CMS. Absolutely. Do you have any plans for HIPAA compliance? Right now, yes, we do. And it is available. If you were to run managed Backendless, then that's HIPAA compliance would be available. Or you can go with standalone Backendless, which will be a version of Backendless you install on your own computers. Then it would be a matter of certifying it yourself. Out of curiosity, why is the iOS SDK so large? Excellent question. So our iOS SDK includes support for audio and video. So there are a lot of extra libraries for codecs and so on. The actual library that Backendless requires is fairly tiny. Thankfully, whenever you build an iOS app, if you're not using media, streaming media, Linker will pull in only the code that is needed, not everything else. So the resulting application is not impacted by the fact that the SDK is so large. We have a few ideas of how to optimize this, so you download only what you need, perhaps with templates for various projects, which are already pre-configured and have all the right libraries. But until then, you need to download everything. But once again, not everything that you get on the SDK is being used, especially if you're not using media streaming support. Parse included a Parse-specific table view controller in their SDK, making it simpler to build a table view without juggling with index paths. Does Backendless provide this? We don't have UI components yet, but nothing really prevents us from getting there. So it really is a matter of finding time to do it. But it is actually in our roadmap. So at some point we will be providing support for this as well. How easy is it to move from Backendless Cloud to my own hosted solution? It's fairly straightforward. So you would run the export, import, you would migrate all the files and your business logic. So it is fairly straightforward. I think it is simpler than migrating from Parse to Parse server based on the documentation that I've read and the research that people have posted. Is there a way to track retention? Not out of the box. That's not. It's not available in the analytics yet. And the same question for crash analytics. No, we don't support crash analytics yet. What is the maximum upload size for a file? I believe it is 500 megabytes. Can you make API calls to the analytics? I assume, if I understand your question correctly, it's whether you can make API calls to retrieve analytics information. That would be available with the management and admin APIs that I talked about, which is available as a function pack in the marketplace. Have you talked about push notification? I did mention it that we support it in Backendless, but I haven't done a demo, which will be next week. How many full-time employees does Backendless employ? We have 16 people on our staff, so it's still fairly small, but fairly powerful. My website has a lot of node modules included. Do I have to upload them manually? Yeah, you can. Yes, a simple way to upload multiple files is to zip them up, upload it to a file. You can actually use drag and drop. Whenever you get a zip file in here, there's going to be an action to unzip it. So if you upload it in there, let's say to the node modules directory right here, then there will be a link. An icon to unzip it, and it will open everything up, and you will have the entire, all the files right in here in the file storage. Is there a way to fetch 1,000 or more objects in a single call? No, you will have to use paging to get more than 100 objects at a time. It's an impossible question to answer, but do you have a feel for rough price comparison with Parse? Where are costs likely to exceed Parse? Well, to begin with, Parse limit is 30 requests per second. To get to the point where we are, which is 50 requests per second, you would already be spending $200 per month with Parse. So our starting point already saves you $200 per month. And for $200 per month, there is a lot of stuff that you can buy in our marketplace. Pretty much, if you were to include every single feature in there, you'd be spending less. So I think that point alone should tell you that Backendless is a lot more affordable than Parse is or used to be. Once you migrate all your data to Backendless, you would have to rewrite your code to use Backendless SDK, or will Backendless support the open source Parse SDK? No, we will not support open source Parse SDK. You would actually have to migrate your application to use Parse SDK. Regarding authentication, is there built-in support for email login sign up and username login sign up? Well, there is an API that provides you ability to log in and register, and that's what you need to use. So you use the API call to register user. Once you do it, the user will show up in the user table, and then use the login API to log in that user into your application. Does geofencing use GPS on iOS? I believe it uses location services. I might be wrong on this, but if you could post on our support to confirm, but I'm pretty sure, or just check on our SDK. It is right on GitHub, and you can see it there. But I suspect it uses location services. Do Backendless Cloud functional limits apply to the whole account or app? Well, it is per app, so it's a repetitive question. 50 API calls per second, it is per app. How much would it cost to go over the 50 requests per second? Great question. So let's take a look at the marketplace. And in here, it's going to be on the, I believe, app management. Additional 10 requests per second, it is $50 per month, which is exactly the same as with Parse. But once again, your starting point is 50 requests per second. And for that, you'd be spending $200 per month with Parse. Can you store additional data inside a user object? Yes, you can, and that's called user properties. You can create them either in Backendless console or with the API. If I sign up for the free service, is it always going to be free, or are you likely to start charging for it as your company grows? Right now, well, I cannot promise for the future what's going to happen in the future. Right now, we don't have any plans to increase pricing or change our pricing, but anything could happen. So for me, it would be immature to say, no, it's always going to be free. I would prefer not to make any changes as far as pricing, because I'm confident that the pricing that we have right now will work, or works. So, but I think it would be very irresponsible of me to make those statements right now. I do hope that it will not change. Which SDKs support social login? Android, iOS, and JavaScript. Does Backendless support third-party authentication such as through Google, GitHub, Facebook, and Twitter? It supports Facebook, Twitter, and Google+. And that was the last question. We went over by about 40 minutes. I'm glad I was able to answer all your questions. If you would like to learn more, there will be another webinar on Tuesday next week. And Meanwhile, if you have any questions, please post them to our support forum, support.backendless.com. Follow us on Twitter. It is at Backendless. Like our page on Facebook. It is facebook.com/Backendless. And I hope that you will be building many great applications with Backendless. Thank you, guys.